They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But for one pregnant architect on the verge of losing everything, revenge wasn't a dish. It was a blueprint. This is the story of how a woman, betrayed in a hospital bed, used the very pen meant to sign away her life to design her husband's complete and utter downfall. The sterile white walls of the hospital room felt like they were closing in. For most, this room in the exclusive maternity ward of Seattle Grace Hospital was a sanctuary of hope. But for Isabella Rossi, it was a gilded cage where her perfect life was about to shatter. She clutched the slight curve of her 6-month pregnancy, the life within her a stark contrast to the death of trust she was about to witness. Her husband, the charismatic real estate mogul Damian Smith, was late. And in the hushed, antiseptic corridors of the hospital, she would soon discover why. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's the story of how a woman, pushed to her breaking point, used the very pen meant to sign away her future to reclaim it all. The air in Suite 7, the most luxurious room in the maternity wing, was thick with the scent of lilies and antiseptic. Isabella Rossi shifted uncomfortably on the plush, state-of-the-art hospital bed. A fine cashmere throw was draped over her legs, a gift from her husband Damien that morning. Everything in her life was like that, beautiful, expensive, and thoughtfully chosen by Damien. Their sprawling Medina waterfront mansion, the gleaming Aston Martin in the garage, even the renowned obstetrician, Dr. Lena Petrova, who was overseeing her high-risk pregnancy. It was a perfect life, meticulously curated by the man she loved. Isabella traced the cover of an architectural magazine resting on her lap. Her own project, the Elysian Towers, was featured on the cover, breathtaking twin skyscraper design that promised to redefine the Seattle skyline. The headline read, "Smith Rossi Developments, the vision of Damian Smith, the genius of Isabella Rossi." It used to make her swell with pride. They were a power couple, the toast of the Pacific Northwest. He, the dealmaker with the Midas touch. She, the architectural prodigy who gave his ambitions form and beauty. Her pregnancy had been a surprise, a miracle after years of being told it might not be possible. But it was classified as high risk, requiring frequent monitoring. Today was one such day, a battery of tests and an overnight stay for observation. Damien had been a pillar of support, or so it seemed. He'd fussed over her, ensuring she had this private suite, personally tasting the hospital's gourmet menu, and promising to stay by her side. He had only just stepped out an hour ago. "Just going to grab us some real coffee, my love," he'd said, kissing her forehead. "This hospital sludge won't do for my queen. And I need to pick up the paperwork from Marcus." The paperwork. A knot of unease tightened in Isabella's stomach, a feeling she'd been pushing down for weeks. Marcus Cole was Damien's lawyer. The papers were to finalize the restructuring of their company. Damien's argument was logical, even caring. "Bella, my love," he had explained a few nights before, their silhouettes framed by the glittering expanse of Lake Washington from their bedroom window. "With the baby coming, we need to simplify. Consolidating all company shares under a single primary holdings trust in my name streamlines everything. It protects our assets from frivolous lawsuits and simplifies the inheritance structure for our child. It's a standard wealth management strategy." He had cupped her face, his gaze earnest. "You're the soul of this company. Your name will always be on the door. This is just legal housekeeping." Isabella, a master of structure and design, understood legal frameworks. But something felt off. Her father, Marco Rossi, a retired contractor who had built his own small but respected business with his bare hands, had always taught her, never sign anything you don't have your own lawyer read, and never give away the sweat of your brow for a promise. She had voiced her hesitation, suggesting her own lawyer and close friend, Ava Chen, take a look. Damien had simply smiled, that disarmingly charming smile that had won over investors and city councils alike. Darling, Ava is a brilliant litigator, but corporate structuring at this level isn't her forte. Marcus has handled my family's estate for decades. This is about protecting us, our family. Don't you trust me? And that was the word, trust. She did trust him. She loved him with a fierce, all-consuming passion. He had plucked her from relative obscurity, recognizing her talent when she was just a junior architect and giving her a canvas as vast as her imagination. How could she not trust him? So she had reluctantly agreed. He was supposed to bring the papers today for her to sign here, in the Hospitala place of vulnerability. An hour had bled into 90 minutes. The coffee, even from the finest artisanal shop in downtown Seattle, shouldn't take this long. A prickle of annoyance gave way to a deeper, colder anxiety. Dr. Petrova had just left after confirming the baby's vitals were strong but advised Isabella to remain calm and avoid stress. Your blood pressure is on the higher side of normal, Isabella. Rest is your best medicine right now. Rest. The word seemed like a joke. Her mind was a whirlwind. She pushed the cashmere throw aside, the cool air of the room a shock against her skin. The baby gave a soft kick, a gentle reminder of what was at stake. Okay, little one, she whispered, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. Let's go find your father. She slid her feet into the plush slippers left by the bed and wrapped a silk robe over her hospital gown. Peeking out, she saw the corridor was quiet. Suite 7 was at the end of the hall, offering maximum privacy. Around the corner was a small, exclusive waiting lounge reserved for the families in the premium suites. Perhaps he was in there, taking a call. As she padded softly down the carpeted hallway, the rhythmic, reassuring beep of the fetal monitor in her room faded, replaced by the low hum of the hospital's ventilation. The door to the private lounge was slightly ajar. From within, she heard a sound that made her freeze. It was Damien's laugh, not his warm, public laugh, but a lower, more intimate chuckle. It was followed by a woman's giggle, a sound that was light, breathy, and sickeningly unfamiliar. Isabella's heart began to pound a frantic drum against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to retreat to the safety of her room and pretend she'd heard nothing. But the architect in her, the woman who needed to understand the foundation of things, couldn't. She had to know what lay behind that door. Slowly, silently, she moved closer, her body pressing against the cool wall. She angled her head, peering through the narrow gap. The sight that met her eyes would forever be burned into her memory, a diorama of betrayal staged in beige and muted blues. Damien was on one of the lounge's love seats. He wasn't alone. A young woman, blonde and stylishly dressed in a pencil skirt and blouse that screamed, ambitious in turn, was perched on his lap. Her arms were wrapped around his neck, and her lips were just inches from his. Isabella recognized her instantly. Chloe Sanders, a recent MBA graduate who had joined their company's marketing department 6 months ago. Isabella had even complimented her on a market analysis report just last week. Chloe was holding a latte. The other, presumably Damien's, was on the table next to the document folder from Marcus Cole. Her coffee. Are you sure she'll sign it? Chloe's voice was a saccharine whisper laced with a tremor of excitement. Without her own lawyer? Damien's hand was stroking Chloe's back, his fingers tracing lazy circles on the thin fabric of her blouse. "Positive," he said, his voice dripping with condescending confidence. "Isabella is sentimental. She trusts me completely. She thinks this is about protecting the family." He used air quotes, a mocking little gesture that felt like a physical blow. "She doesn't have the stomach for the ruthless side of the business. That's always been my domain." Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. Her hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. "Sentimental." He said it like it was a disease. Chloe giggled again, nestling closer. "And once she signs. Once you have 100% control." "Once she signs," Damien murmured, his lips brushing against Chloe's ear, "the Smith-Rossi name becomes a formality. The company becomes what it always should have been, mine. Smith Industries. And you, my dear, will be by my side, not as an intern, but as... well, the possibilities are endless." He pulled back, looking into Chloe's adoring eyes. "Besides, the timing is perfect. Her being pregnant and emotional makes her more pliable. And this little health scare. It just makes my concern seem all the more genuine." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just a physical affair. It was a calculated, cold-blooded corporate and emotional coup. He was using her love, her trust, and their unborn child as weapons against her. The Elysian Towers, her masterpiece, the years of sleepless nights and creative struggle. In his mind, it was all just a stepping stone for his empire. She wasn't his partner. She was an asset to be managed and ultimately liquidated. Chloe leaned in and kissed him a long, possessive kiss. Isabella watched, frozen, as her husband, the father of her child, kissed another woman just 30 feet from her hospital bed, next to the papers that would legally strip her of her life's work. A wave of dizziness washed over her. The room began to tilt. The beep of the monitor in her room, once a sound of life, now seemed like a countdown to demolition. She backed away from the door, her movements stiff and robotic. Her hand, still pressed against her stomach, was trembling. The baby, as if sensing its mother's distress, was still. She stumbled back to her room, her mind a maelstrom of shock and white-hot fury. The image of Damien and Chloe, the sound of his words sentimental, pliable, my domain, they echoed in the silent, pristine room. The lilies on the bedside table now smelled funereal. The cashmere throw felt like a shroud. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The tears she expected didn't come. Instead, a terrifying, crystalline clarity settled over her. The architect, the strategist, the part of her that Damien had so arrogantly dismissed, was waking up. He thought she was sentimental. He thought she was pliable. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. Her gaze fell on her phone lying on the bedside table. She snatched it up, her fingers flying across the screen, her heart pounding with a new, dangerous rhythm. She had one phone call to make before he returned. She found the contact and pressed call. It rang twice. Ava Chen speaking. The voice was sharp, professional, and exactly what Isabella needed to hear. Isabella's voice was a low, steady whisper, devoid of the hysteria she felt. "It's me. Change of plans. I need you to listen very, very carefully." The 15 minutes after the call to Ava were the longest of Isabella's life. She sat on the edge of her bed, the silk robe a poor defense against the chill that had settled deep in her bones. She wasn't just cold, she was forged steel being plunged into ice water. The shock had solidified into a hard, sharp resolve. The tears could wait. Grief could wait. Right now, there was only the plan. Ava, ever the brilliant tactician, had understood immediately. There was no, "I told you so," no emotional outburst, just a calm, lethal focus. "Okay, Bella. Don't let him see a thing. We play this his way until the moment we don't. I'm on it. I have everything we need. Just buy me a little time." Buy time. Isabella could do that. She was an architect. She understood the importance of timing, of laying a foundation before erecting the walls. She heard his footsteps in the hall. She quickly smoothed the bed covers, took a deep, centering breath, and composed her features into a mask of weary tenderness. She had to act. Her entire future, and the future of her child, depended on the performance of a lifetime. Damien entered, balancing 2 coffee cups and the leather-bound document folder. He wore a look of practiced concern, a furrow in his brow that she now saw was pure theater. "There you are," she said, her voice soft, a little weak. "I was starting to worry." "Sorry, my love," he said, placing the items on the rolling bedside table. The line was insane. And then Marcus called with a last-minute question. "You know how he is." He handed her a cup. "Your non-caffeinated, extra froth, cinnamon-dusted monstrosity." She accepted it, her fingers brushing his. The casual touch, once a source of comfort, now felt repulsive. She forced a small smile. "My hero." "Always," he said, pulling a chair close to her bed. He opened the document folder. "Now, I know you're tired, so let's get this over with quickly. Marcus has flagged the signature pages." He spread the documents out on the table, a sea of dense black and white clauses that represented the sum of her professional life. Her gaze flickered over the title, Asset Consolidation and Share Transfer Agreement. It was all there. The transfer of her 49% stake in Smith Rossi Developments to the DT Holdings Trust. The assignment of intellectual property rights for all past and future designs. It was a complete and total abdication. It looked so final, she murmured, playing her part, injecting a note of vulnerability into her voice. Damien reached out and squeezed her hand. "It's a formality, Bella. A shield to protect all of this," he gestured around the room, "and our baby, from anything the world throws at us. This makes us stronger. A single, unified front. A single, unified front." The hypocrisy was so profound, it was almost artistic. He was unifying the assets under his name so he could share them with another woman. "Okay," she said, taking another deep breath. "Okay. Where's a pen?" He beamed, his relief palpable. He clicked a heavy, expensive-looking fountain pen and handed it to her. "Here. The best for my best girl." The pen felt unnaturally heavy in her hand. Its nib hovered over the signature line, the place where Isabella Rossi would cease to be a partner and become a dependent. This was the moment. The precipice. Her phone, placed face down on the bed, vibrated. As planned. She looked at Damien, a flicker of contrived panic in her eyes. "Oh, it's Dr. Petrova's office. I should probably take this. Now." Damien's frustration was barely concealed. "Can't it wait 5 seconds?" "I don't know, what if it's about the tests," she said, her voice trembling slightly. She answered the call, putting it on speakerphone as Ava had instructed. Hello, Isabella. It was Ava's voice, but pitched with a professional urgency. Ava? I thought this was the doctor, Isabella said, feigning confusion. My apologies, Isabella. I'm using the office's main line, Ava said smoothly. I know you're in the hospital, but I just received a rather urgent query on the Elysian project's zoning permits that needs your immediate clarification. Forgive my interruption. Damien sighed, drumming his fingers on the table. For God's sake, can't her assistant handle it? Isabella looked at him, her eyes wide. Ava, Damien is right here. We were just about to sign the new consolidation papers for the company. There was a calculated pause on the other end of the line. The consolidation papers? Ava's voice was sharp. The ones Marcus Cole drafted? Isabella, did you get my email this morning? The one with the subject line, Addendum to Smith-Rossi Partnership Agreement? Isabella's heart gave a leap. This was it. Email? No, I've been trying to rest. I haven't checked. Damien's eyes narrowed. What addendum? Marcus said the documents were final. Well, they weren't, Ava's voice was cold iron. Isabella, under our original 2018 partnership agreement, which I drafted, there's a key person clause section 11, subsection B. It states that any transfer of shares or intellectual property requires a 48-hour review period by both partners' legal counsel. More importantly, it requires a specific, notarized addendum acknowledging the transfer of foundational creative assets, which in this case would be the Elysian concept. Without that addendum signed and notarized by both parties, any share transfer is contestable and potentially void. Isabella turned to Damien, her face a perfect mask of confusion and concern. A void transfer, Damien? What does that mean? Damien's face had paled slightly. He glared at the phone as if he could will Ava to combust. Marcus is the best corporate lawyer in the state. He would know that. Then perhaps he should reread the original agreement his client signed, Ava retorted. I'm looking at your signed copy right now, Damien. The clause is there. I'm sending a copy of the required addendum to your and Isabella's email as we speak. It's a simple one-page document. You both need to sign it along with the main transfer for the whole thing to be legally sound. Isabella looked at the pen in her hand, then at the documents. So. I shouldn't sign these yet. Damien's jaw was clenched. He was trapped. To argue against the addendum would be to admit he was trying to pull a fast one. To agree would be to walk into Ava's trap, whatever it was. But in this setting, with his concerned husband mask on, he had no choice. No, of course not, he forced out, his voice tight. We'll wait. We do everything by the book. Always. He stood up, agitated. I'll print it out at the nurse's station. He snatched his phone and practically stormed out of the room, leaving the document folder and his coffee behind. The moment the door clicked shut, Isabella let out a shuddering breath. She hung up the phone. She had done it. She had bought the time. Her eyes scanned the room, the luxurious trap Damien had set for her. And then she saw it. On the bedside table, next to the folder, was his wallet. In his haste, he had left it behind. A sudden, reckless idea sparked in her mind. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble. But Damien's arrogance was his greatest weakness. He thought she was sentimental and pliable. He would never imagine she would be capable of such a thing. Her hands trembling, she reached for the wallet. She flipped it open. Tucked behind his driver's license and his black card was a small, folded piece of paper. It was a receipt, not for coffee, but from a high-end jewelry store downtown. Van Cleef & Arpels. Dated yesterday. The item description made her stomach clench: Alhambra bracelet, mother of pearl. The price was staggering. It wasn't a gift for her, she'd received nothing of the sort. This was for Chloe. A thank you, perhaps, for her role in the impending corporate takeover. But it wasn't the receipt that held her attention. Tucked behind it was another small, metallic object. A key. Not a house key or a car key. It was a small, silver safe deposit box key. Engraved on it was the name of a private Bankroneer Secure Trust and a box number, 713. Isabella stared at the key. What secrets did Damien keep under lock and key? Financial documents, passports. Things he wouldn't even trust his lawyer Marcus Cole with. Things he certainly didn't want his sentimental wife to ever see. Her mind raced, connecting dots she hadn't even seen before. The push for consolidation, the affair, the secret bank. This wasn't just about the company. This was about a complete erasure. He was likely building a new life, funded by their shared empire. And she and the baby were being written out of the script. Just then, her own phone buzzed. An email from Ava. The subject line, the real addendum. She opened it. The document was, as Ava had said, 1 page. It looked official, full of dense legalese. But Ava had highlighted a single sentence in the middle of a long paragraph. And it is further acknowledged that all real property assets, specifically the plot designated King County Parcel 11728, currently held under the private ownership of Isabella Rossi, will hereby be absorbed into the DT Holdings Trust. Parcel 11728. It sounded so sterile, so bureaucratic. But Isabella knew exactly what it was. It was a small, overlooked plot of industrial land near the port that she had inherited from her grandfather years ago. It was considered worthless for decades, until she, with her architect's eye, realized its potential. It had the perfect bedrock and zoning potential for a skyscraper. It was the land upon which the entire Elysian Towers project was being built. She owned it solely. It had never been folded into Smith Rossi Developments because its value was negligible until her designs made it priceless. Damien had tried to buy it from her years ago, but she had kept it for sentimental renaissance memory of her grandfather. Another thing he'd probably mocked. Ava's strategy was brilliant. She had drafted an addendum that gave Damien exactly what he thought he wanted, the final piece of the puzzle, the land itself. He would be so focused on the prize, so eager to close the deal before his emotional wife changed her mind, that he wouldn't scrutinize the rest of the document. But there was a second attachment in Ava's email, a file named proxyactivation.pdf. Isabella's breath hitched. This was the masterstroke. She heard Damien's footsteps returning. She had seconds. She quickly photographed the safe deposit box key with her phone, sending the image to Ava with a one-word message: investigate. Then she slipped the key and the receipt back into his wallet, placing it exactly where it had been. She deleted the photo from her phone. Damien returned, holding 2 freshly printed sheets of paper. "All right," he said, his good humor forcibly restored. "One for you, one for me. Let's sign this bloody addendum and the transfer, and then I can let you rest." He laid the pages out. Isabella glanced at the sheet he handed her. It was the one Ava had sent. She saw the sentence about parcel 11728, buried in the text. He hadn't noticed. His greed had blinded him. "Okay," she whispered, taking the heavy fountain pen again. She looked at him one last time, searching the face of the man she had loved. She saw nothing but ambition and deceit. The love she'd felt was gone, replaced by the cold, hard calculus of survival. The story would go that she signed the ownership papers, and she did. Her signature was firm and clear on the addendum transferring her land. Then, with the same steady hand, she signed the main document, transferring her shares, her company, her life's work. She pushed the papers across the table to him. He signed his own copies with a flourish, a triumphant glint in his eye. He had it all. He had won. "There," he said, gathering the signed documents into the folder. "All done now. Our family is secure." As he closed the folder, a sharp, stabbing pain shot through Isabella's abdomen. This part wasn't an act. The stress, the betrayal, the sheer adrenaline of the last hour had taken its toll. She gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. Her face, which had been a mask of calm, became genuinely pale with pain and fear. "Bella." Damien's head snapped up. "What is it?" I don't know," she breathed, her vision starting to swim. "The baby. Something's wrong." The heart monitor beside the bed, which had been beeping steadily, suddenly shrieked, its rhythm turning frantic and alarming. The numbers on the screen flashed red. Damien stared, his triumph evaporating into panic. "Nurse! Doctor!" he yelled, fumbling for the call button. Seconds later, the door burst open and Dr. Petrova rushed in, followed by two nurses. "What happened?" the doctor demanded, her eyes immediately going to the monitors. "Her blood pressure is through the roof. Get me a tranquilizer, now. Mr. Smith, you need to leave. Right now." Damien was hustled out of the room, his face a picture of confusion and fear. He clutched the leather folder to his chest, the prize he had just won already tainted. As the nurses worked around her, preparing and for, Isabella locked eyes with Dr. Petrova. In that moment of genuine medical crisis, she felt a flicker of her original plan. She had signed away everything. Damien had the papers. He had won. But as the tranquilizer began to seep into her veins, a faint, steely smile touched her lips. He had the papers. He had the shares. He now even had the land. But Ava had the proxy. And Isabella had the key. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. The world swam back into focus, slowly, softened at the edges by the sedative. The frantic beeping of the monitor had been replaced by a slow, steady pulse. Dr. Petrova was sitting by her bed, her expression a mixture of professional concern and personal sympathy. "Isabella," she said softly, "you gave us quite a scare. Your blood pressure spiked to a dangerous level. We've stabilized you, and the baby is fine, but you need to be on complete bed rest. No stress, and I mean it." Isabella nodded, her throat dry. "Damien?" "I sent him home," Dr. Petrova said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I told him the best thing for you right now is absolute quiet. He can come back tomorrow during visiting hours." He was reluctant, but he left the hospital. She paused. He also left this. She gestured to the bedside table. The leather document folder was gone, but sitting there was the expensive fountain pen. He had forgotten it in his panic, a small, overlooked casualty of his victory. Isabella stared at it, a symbol of the deal he had made, the future he had stolen. Once the doctor left, Isabella reached for her phone. There was a new message from Ava. Ava, proxy activated. Timestamped 1 minute after you signed the transfer. It's done. Now you rest. I'll handle the rest. And I'm already working on box 713. Isabella closed her eyes, relief washing over her. The Trojan horse was inside the city walls. The document Damien now possessed, the one that gave him total control of Smith Rossi Developments, was a masterpiece of legal deception. Ava had anticipated his every move. The proxy activation form Isabella had signed digitally just before the drama began was the key. It was a conditional proxy vote, a ticking time bomb hidden within the company's bylaws that even Marcus Cole had overlooked. It stipulated that in the event of a full share transfer, a cool-down period of 72 business hours was initiated before the transfer of voting rights became final. During that 72-hour window, the departing partner Isabella retained their full voting power. By signing the addendum and the transfer, Damien had unknowingly started the clock on his own demise. He thought he was closing a deal. In reality, he was initiating a countdown. For the next 3 days, Isabella followed the doctor's orders. She rested. She ate the bland hospital food. She listened to the steady, reassuring beat of her baby's heart on the monitor. She spoke to Damien on the phone, playing the part of the frail, recovering wife. He was cloyingly attentive, his voice thick with a concern that now sounded utterly false. He told her he was handling everything at the office, streamlining operations, and preparing for a new era of growth. She knew what that meant. He was meeting with investors, leveraging his newfound 100% ownership to secure massive new lines of credit. He was telling Chloe they had one. Meanwhile, Ava worked with the quiet, deadly efficiency of a predator. On the first day, she used Isabella's proxy vote to call an emergency virtual board meeting. The board of Smith Rossi Developments was small, just Isabella and Damien. With Isabella holding 49% of the votes, she couldn't outvote him. But the company bylaws, which Ava herself had written, had a specific clause for emergency meetings. A single motion could be passed with a simple majority, but it had to be ratified by a third-party ethics committee within 48 hours. It was a clause designed to prevent hostile takeovers. Now, Ava was using it to stage a coup from within. The motion she put forward was simple: to authorize a full, independent, third-party audit of all company financials, project budgets, and expense accounts for the past 24 months. Damien, joining the call from his gleaming office, was blindsided. An audit? Now. That's absurd. We're on the cusp of a major expansion. It will paralyze us. Isabella is concerned about potential fiscal irregularities, Ava stated calmly, acting as Isabella's legal representative. Given her current medical state and the recent restructuring, she wants to ensure all assets are accounted for before her departure is finalized. It's simple due diligence. Damien had to agree. To refuse an audit would look incredibly suspicious to the ethics committee and, more importantly, to the banks he was courting. Fine, he snarled. Authorize your pointless audit. It will find nothing. He was wrong. On the second day, the auditors Ava had hired a notoriously aggressive forensic accounting firm descended on Smith Rossi's headquarters. Damien, believing he was untouchable, had gotten sloppy. The auditors quickly uncovered what he had hidden in plain sight. A consulting fee slush fund. Payments for lavish trips with no business purpose. Exorbitant gifts coded as marketing expenses. They found the payment to Van Cleef and Arpels. And they found a series of large, regular payments to a shell corporation named Sanders Solutions LLC. The sole proprietor, Chloe Sanders. He wasn't just paying for her affection, he was embezzling company funds to do it. Simultaneously, Ava's private investigator, a former FBI agent, had been working on the safe deposit box. Getting a warrant to open a private box is nearly impossible. But the PI didn't need a warrant. He just needed leverage. He ran a background check on the manager of the Rainier Secure Trust branch. It turned out the manager had a significant gambling problem, with debts to some very unsavory people. The PI made a quiet visit. He didn't make threats. He just made it clear that certain financial indiscretions could become public knowledge, while a moment of forgetfulness, say, allowing a lawyer with a power of attorney for the wife of a box holder to view the inventory list could make his problems disappear. The manager caved. Ava was granted a supervised, off-the-books look at the contents. What she found was the final nail in Damien's coffin. The box didn't contain cash or gold. It contained documents. A second set of books for the company, detailing the real profit margins before Damien skimmed his share. Undisclosed agreements with suppliers who gave him personal kickbacks. And most damningly, preliminary plans for a new life, deeds for a property in the Cayman Islands, applications for offshore bank accounts, and a handwritten ledger outlining his plan to slowly bankrupt Smith Rossi Developments over 5 years after draining it of all its cash, leaving the shell for creditors to fight over while he and Chloe vanished. He wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was planning to defraud the company, his investors, and the city itself. On the morning of the third day, the 72-hour countdown was nearly over. Damien's voting rights would become absolute at 5 p.m. He was sitting in his office, likely celebrating his imminent, final victory. Isabella was still in her hospital bed. Dr. Petrova had just approved her release for the following day. She was looking out the window at the Seattle rain when Ava called. "I have everything," Ava said, her voice grim but triumphant. "The audit report, the contents of the box. It's worse than we thought, Bella. But we have him cold." "What happens now?" Isabella asked, her hand on her belly. "Now," Ava replied, "we detonate. At 4 p.m., 1 hour before the transfer of power becomes final, I am using your final proxy vote to call a second emergency board meeting. The motion will be simple, to remove CEO Damien Smith for gross financial misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, and corporate fraud, effective immediately." Isabella's breath caught. "Can we do that?" "With the evidence from the audit, the ethics committee will ratify it in a heartbeat." "He won't have time to react," Ava explained. "Simultaneously, I am filing a temporary restraining order and a civil lawsuit on your behalf, citing fraud, embezzlement, and a request to dissolve the partnership and liquidate all assets under court supervision. The lawsuit will include a motion to freeze the DT Holdings Trust and all associated company and personal accounts pending the outcome. By 5 p.m., he'll be a CEO of a company he's been fired from, with all his money frozen, and facing a mountain of legal trouble." Isabella was silent for a moment, processing the beautiful, brutal efficiency of it all. Damien had wanted the company. Ava's plan would ensure that by the time he legally owned it, the company would be nothing but a crater of lawsuits and debt. "And the land?" Isabella asked softly. "The addendum I signed. He has my grandfather's land." "He has a piece of paper," Ava corrected her. A contract signed under fraudulent pretenses is null and void. We will get the land back. We will get everything back. A darker note entered Ava's voice. Isabella. The police will likely want to press criminal charges based on this evidence. Embezzlement, tax evasion. He could face prison time. Isabella thought of Damien's mocking words, sentimental, pliable. She thought of him stroking Chloe's back. She thought of the future he had planned for her and their child, to be discarded after they had served their purpose. Let them, Isabella said, her voice as cold and clear as the winter rain outside. Let justice run its course. She hung up the phone and looked at the expensive fountain pen on her bedside table. She picked it up. With a sudden, fierce movement, she snapped it in two. The pieces clattered onto the floor. The deal was broken. At 3:55 p.m., Damien Smith was on top of the world. He stood in his corner office, a glass of 30-year-old Macallan in hand, looking down at the city that was his to conquer. Chloe was beside him, her hand resting on his arm. The Elysian Towers project site was visible in the distance, a testament to his impending triumph. In just over an hour, Isabella's proxy vote would expire. The company, the land, the future. It would all be his, unequivocally. To Smith Industries, Chloe said, raising her own glass. To us, Damien corrected, clinking his glass against hers. He felt a surge of pure, unadulterated power. He had outmaneuvered everyone. His sentimental wife, her pit bull lawyer, the whole system. At precisely 4 p.m., his computer chimed. An email notification. Mandatory emergency board meeting, 4:05 p.m. He frowned. What the hell is this now? He muttered, setting his drink down. He clicked open the virtual meeting link, a flicker of annoyance passing over his face. Chloe watched, a hint of concern in her eyes. Ava Chen's face appeared on the screen, her expression like granite. Mr. Smith, thank you for joining. As per the bylaws, this is the second emergency meeting called by Isabella Rossi via proxy. This is harassment, Chen, Damien snapped. My wife is in a hospital bed. Whatever petty grievance you have can wait until Monday. I'm afraid it can't, Ava said, her voice dangerously calm. I am putting forth one motion, to remove CEO Damien Smith on the grounds of gross financial misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, and corporate fraud, supported by evidence from the court-approved audit conducted by Sterling Forensic Accounting. Damien felt a cold dread snake its way up his spine. You're bluffing. That audit isn't even complete. It was completed at 2:15 p.m. today, Ava said, holding up a thick, bound document to the camera. It details a slush fund, the embezzlement of over $1.2 million in corporate funds, including payments made to a shell company, Sanders Solutions LLC, which I believe is an entity you are familiar with. Chloe, standing behind Damien, went deathly pale. Damien stared at the screen, his mind reeling. This is a fabrication. Slander. Is it? Ava's voice was relentless. Is the sworn testimony from the manager of Rainier Secure Trust also a fabrication? The one detailing the contents of your safe deposit box number 713. The second set of books. The plans to defraud your investors by systematically bankrupting the company. I have copies of everything, Damien. And so does the King County Prosecutor's Office, as of 10 minutes ago. The blood drained from Damien's face. The office, which moments before had felt like a throne room, now felt like a shrinking cell. Box 713. He had been untouchable, invisible. How? As the sole other board member, Ava continued, her voice ringing with finality, Isabella Rossi casts her 49% vote as aye. The motion passes. Your termination is effective immediately. Security is on their way up to your office to escort you from the premises. All your corporate accounts and access have been revoked. You can't do this. Damien roared, slamming his fist on the desk. At 5 p.m., I own this company. I own it all. At 5 p.m., Ava corrected him, you will be the 100% owner of a company that has fired you, a company whose assets are about to be frozen by a court order, and a company at the center of a massive criminal investigation. Congratulations on your acquisition. You'll receive my civil complaint shortly. The video call ended. Silence descended on the office, broken only by Chloe's panicked breathing. Damien, what did she mean? A shell company? Criminal investigation? Damien didn't answer. He was frantically trying to log into his corporate bank accounts on his phone. Access denied. He tried to log into his personal investment portfolio, the one tied to the DT Holdings Trust. A large red banner flashed across the screen, account frozen pending legal action. The empire he had spent a decade building, the victory he had been savoring just minutes before, had crumbled into digital dust. It was all gone. The door to his office opened. Two large, stone-faced security guards walked in. Behind them was Marcus Cole, his own lawyer, holding a tablet. Marcus looked shaken, his face ashen. Damien, Marcus said, his voice strained. I just got off the phone with Ms. Chen. The evidence is overwhelming. The firm has to withdraw as your counsel due to conflict of interest. These gentlemen will escort you out. Marcus, you work for me. Damien yelled, his voice cracking. Not anymore, Marcus said quietly, avoiding his gaze. You need a criminal lawyer. Immediately. Chloe backed away from him, her eyes wide with terror. I had nothing to do with any second set of books, she stammered. I just did the marketing work he paid me for. She looked at Damien, not with affection, but with the horror of someone realizing they'd tied their fate to a sinking ship. She turned and fled the office. As the guards stepped forward, Damien looked around the room. At the priceless art, the panoramic view, the life he had built on a foundation of lies. It was all dissolving before his eyes. They took his arms, and he didn't resist. He was led through the open-plan office, past the desks of the employees who had once revered and feared him. They stared, their faces a mixture of shock and fascination, as the great Damien Smith was frog-marched out of his own building like a common thief. He stepped out onto the rain-slicked pavement of downtown Seattle. A ruined man. He had the clothes on his back, a phone that was now a useless brick, and a wallet full of plastic cards that were suddenly worthless. The Macallan he'd been drinking just moments ago felt like a distant memory from another man's life. He looked up at the sky, at the half-finished skeletons of the Elysian Towers. His legacy. Isabella's design. The land he had conned her into signing over. Even that felt like a mockery now, a monument to his own spectacular hubris. His phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. He answered, desperate for any lifeline. Mr. Smith, a gruff voice said, this is Detective Miller with the Seattle PD's Financial Crimes Unit. We'd like you to come down to headquarters to answer a few questions. The line went dead. The rain began to fall harder, plastering his expensive suit to his skin. Damian Smith, the millionaire mogul, stood alone on the sidewalk, dispossessed and defeated, as the city he thought he owned looked on with cold indifference. The trap so carefully laid for his wife had snapped shut on him instead. The following morning, Isabella walked out of Seattle Grace Hospital, not as a frail patient, but as a silent victor. The city was already ablaze with the news of Damian's spectacular downfall. Headlines on news sites screamed of his ousting amid fraud allegations, painting a picture of an empire collapsing under the weight of its creator's deceit. Damian Smith, the mogul, was now a pariah. Isabella ignored the noise, stepping into Ava Chen's waiting car, her focus entirely on the final move. Instead of retreating to the Medina mansion, now a frozen asset in a legal war zone, she found sanctuary at her father's quiet home. It was there that Ava laid out the endgame. "He's hired Peterson," Ava began, without preamble, sliding a folder onto the dining table. "The best and most ruthless criminal defense attorney in the state. Their strategy is predictable. They'll paint Damian as a man who made foolish mistakes under pressure, and you as a vengeful, scorned wife. They will try to use the baby as a bargaining chip. A child he was using as a pawn in a corporate takeover," Isabella stated, her voice devoid of emotion. Her hand rested on the proud curve of her stomach. "He has no chips left to play." "Exactly," Ava affirmed. "Which is why we aren't negotiating. We're dictating terms." She opened the folder to reveal a settlement offer. It wasn't a deal. It was a surrender document. Its clauses were brutal and absolute. Damian would be required to plead guilty to charges of financial malfeasance, a deal that would save him from the more severe federal charges of fraud and a lengthy prison sentence. In exchange for this leniency, he would relinquish everything. He would cede all claims to their marital assets, the mansion, the cars, the art, the bank accounts. He would sign over 100% of the intellectual property for the Elysian Towers and all previous designs, legally acknowledging Isabella as their sole creator. The DT Holdings Trust, the vehicle for his planned theft, would be dissolved, its remaining assets liquidated to repay the company's creditors and the funds he had embezzled. The final clause was the most devastating. He would be required to terminate his parental rights. No claims, no visitation, no financial responsibility. In the eyes of the law, when her child was born, Damian Smith would be a stranger. "He gets his freedom, or at least a heavily curtailed version of it," Ava said quietly. "But he loses his kingdom and his heir. He might fight this last part." "He won't," Isabella said with cold certainty. "Damian never truly loved me or this baby. He loved what we represented, success, legacy, perfection. The only thing he values more is his own freedom. He will make the trade." A week later, they met in a sterile conference room at Ava's firm. The transformation in Damian was shocking. The swaggering, charismatic mogul was gone, replaced by a gaunt, hollow-eyed man in an ill-fitting suit. He was a king without a kingdom, his rage buried under a heavy blanket of defeat. His lawyer, Peterson, postured and argued, but his words were hollow, systematically dismantled by Ava's mountain of irrefutable evidence, the damning audit, the contents of the safe deposit box, and the sworn testimony of a terrified Chloe Sanders, who had quickly turned on Damian to save herself. The charade ended when Peterson sighed, turning to his client. "It's the deal on the table, Damian. It's all there is." Damian's haunted gaze fell on Isabella. He searched her face for a flicker of the sentimental, pliable woman he had betrayed, but found nothing of the sort. He found only the cool, steady eyes of the architect who had designed his ruin. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a hoarse whisper. Why? We had everything. Isabella leaned forward, her voice quiet but cutting through the silence of the room. No, Damien. You wanted everything. You were so blinded by your own greed that you saw everyone around you as an asset to be leveraged or liquidated. You saw me, your partner, the mother of your child, as the final piece to be signed away. She rose slowly, a figure of undeniable power. I wasn't an asset. I was the foundation. And you built your house on a lie. She didn't wait for a reply. She and Ava turned and walked out, leaving him to contemplate the wreckage of his life. 20 minutes later, Peterson appeared with the settlement. Every page was signed with Damien Smith's now worthless signature. He had signed away his company, his fortune, and his child. As Isabella took the papers, she felt a gentle kick from within. Not the legacy of a fallen man, but the future of a woman who was finally, completely free. The gambit was over. Checkmate. 6 months later, the Seattle sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. On the once stagnant construction site near the port, the sounds of industry had returned with a vengeance. Cranes danced against the skyline, and the steel skeleton of a magnificent tower was rising from the ground. At the edge of the site stood Isabella Rossi. She was no longer a wife, no longer a partner in a toxic enterprise. She was the sole founder and visionary of Rossi Designs, a new firm built on a foundation of ethics, innovation, and unwavering strength. In her arms, nestled in a soft carrier, was her daughter, Sophia, a beautiful, healthy 3-month-old with her mother's dark eyes and a peaceful demeanor. The fall of Damien Smith was old news. He had accepted the plea bargain, receiving a sentence of 5 years probation and 2,000 hours of community service. He had vanished from public life, a disgraced ghost haunting the fringes of the city he once ruled. The Medina mansion had been sold. The company was gone. His name was a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. Isabella had risen from the ashes, not with scorched earth anger, but with a quiet, determined focus. She had secured new funding for her project from a consortium of investors, many of them women, who were drawn to her story, her talent, and her integrity. She had renamed the project. The Elysian Towers were no more. Now rising into the sky was the Sophia Tower. She had reacquired her grandfather's land, its title clear and unencumbered. She had rehired many of the best employees from the old company, creating a culture of collaboration and respect. Her phone buzzed. It was Ava. "You're trending on Forbes," Ava said, her voice smiling. From betrayal to blueprint, how Isabella Rossi is rebuilding Seattle's skyline and her life. Isabella smiled, her gaze fixed on the rising tower. Headlines. "They come and go, Ava." "This one feels different," Ava said. "This one feels like the truth." "It is," Isabella agreed softly. She looked down at her daughter, who was stirring in her sleep. She adjusted the carrier, her touch gentle but sure. The architect and the mother were one and the same, both builders of the future. The story people told was that a millionaire had cheated on his pregnant wife at the hospital, and seconds later, she signed the ownership papers that led to his ruin. But that was only the surface. The real story was etched in the steel beams of the Sophia Tower. It was a story about a woman who discovered that her greatest strength was not the man standing beside her, but the foundation she had built within herself. She hadn't destroyed Damien's empire out of revenge. She had simply cleared the rubble to build her own. And her creation, born from betrayal but forged in resilience, would stand taller and shine brighter than anything he could have ever imagined. The story of Isabella Rossi is a powerful reminder that our lowest moments can become the bedrock for our greatest triumphs. It's not just about the sting of betrayal, but about the incredible strength we find when we refuse to be victims of our circumstances. Isabella's journey shows us that true power isn't about having everything. It's about having the courage to reclaim what is rightfully yours, whether that's a company, your self-respect, or your future. She turned a moment of devastating heartbreak into a masterclass in strategy and resilience. If her story of strength and sweet justice moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own inner power. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next real-life drama. What did you think of Isabella's plan? Let us know in the comments below.